It took me years to finally embrace myself post illness.
I was in the more scared camp. So I became much more cautious. I feel like I lost a lot of my joie de vivre.
There was something absolutely electrifying about it, and there's an energy I've never found elsewhere in the world than in Cairo.
I don't see what you're saying about Cairo particularly, but for me, I find that there is a very special energy in Aswan.
Living the now is crucial for me, but I wish to weave something, with somebody and install a certain, or nourish or cultivate a perennity.
We're going to actually begin, if you don't mind, at a very difficult time for you. So, of course, I'm referring to your diagnosis in 2015 with Hodgkin lymphoma. Some of my audience will know that I had the same form of cancer, and I have talked about it on and off in different episodes, depending on who I've been talking with. But I'd like to hear from you, firstly, how you found out you had it. You were very young. You were 27, were you?
So I was diagnosed at the age of 26 in 2015, but at a quite advanced stage because it was stage 3. So I must have been ill for roughly a year and a half. And during that year and a half, that's when I took the decision to leave the corporate world of fashion and Dior. And it's also during that time that I chose to move to Morocco. So when I got diagnosed, I was actually on a short trip in Paris. It was a 1-week stay in transit to China where I had work. Although I had been in Morocco for 5-6 months, this fatigue kept taking much more space in my day-to-day life. And each trip would make me anxious because I kept wondering how to cope with this. And I had believed that perhaps at the age of 26, the aging process had started, and that's what I was living.
Even though that's such a young age, Louis.
Young age. I guess I was just nurturing a form of denial. I refused to see the symptoms for what they were. On that week in Paris, I reconnected with close friends, and one made me notice that my neckline was swollen, had sort of changed, and he urged me to consult. Although I only had a couple of days in town before traveling to China, I called several doctors, and none of them had an availability. But luckily, this retired woman allowed me to take me. And understanding my rhythm of life, which was quite nomadic already, and always on the go, she urged me to do in the afternoon before the flight to Shanghai, few exams and a blood test, and said to me, although it's hard for me to pronounce myself on the diagnosis, I'm pretty sure what it is, and I'll tell you its color if you want, which goes against the classic medical protocol. But because of this lifestyle you need to slow down and you need to consider coming back to Paris for an extended period of time. Luckily, she shook me very fondly, and I went on that flight. And during this 1-week trip, I kept receiving progressively all the results, the blood tests, the analysis of the echography. And upon my return to Paris, I started immediately the treatment, which lasted 9 months. So for for almost about a year, I was mainly in Paris again, although it was a city I had meant to leave, and luckily I had Morocco as an escape every 2 weeks between treatments, where I would go and rest and resource myself. And I think it's in this year that I've established a duality between the two cities, and one cannot go without the other. So I bridged my life between Marrakech and Paris. And I think this was forced by illness.
So you reconciled with the city because you had not wanted to make it part of your life, but force majeure kind of made you reconsider the city.
Absolutely. And I think I faced perhaps the most beautiful aspect of of France, its social system. The public system is extraordinary. So I was followed by incredible professors in the public system. Everything was taken in charge by the state, and I think that's when I truly measured the privileges I have being French and being a citizen of this society.
Yeah, and I think at 26, you're at the top of the threshold for lymphoma. It's either a teenage disease or a sort of a 60 plus disease. Mine was found out at the age of 34, which was extremely rare. None of the doctors had said to me that pregnancy can trigger this, and that's something you told me, and I was very surprised to hear that. And obviously, as a young mother, it's the last thing you expect, that you're unwell in this particular way. Like you, I did treatment. I did less than you. I did 6 months. I did chemotherapy, and I've been clear now for 17 years. But all these are facts that we've just recounted to each other, right? We've just recounted, the steps we did and the steps we took, and so on. But for me, the after life, if you like, was extremely difficult. I remember very clearly my husband saying to me, and he meant it in the kindest way. He said, "Well, now you're done. We'll get back to normal life." And I remember that comment, and I remember it to today. And I said to him, I said, "Well, what do you mean? Nothing is the same. I'm not the same. It's completely changed me." And I knew that even though it was still very early days, I had just finished my treatment. I'd been given the all clear, but I knew that things were not going to be the same. And I'm curious to know for you, what were those changes? Because for me, they appeared very slowly, and only now, with the benefit of time, can I look back and say that changed me, or that's where I became someone different, and so on.
I think the first thing that I really sense, and I've been holding to ever since, was a trust in my intuition. It's and a trust in maybe in destiny, in the form of mektub, which I never saw before. If anything, it's giving me trust in life, and it has opened a door to a spirituality which is not dogmatic at all, which doesn't relate to any branch or groups, but a sort of inner flame, which is extremely empowering at times. But
Yeah.
obviously, the fragility of the body and the reconquest of my body took some time. And I think it's shaken a lot of insecurities, which were so present, but sort of buried. And it took me years to finally embrace myself post illness.
Yeah. I know some people who feel very reckless and risk and want to take risks after a situation like that. And then others who are much more cautious and scared. I was in the more scared camp. So I became much more cautious. I feel like I lost a lot of my joie de vivre. It comes back and it's there at points, but that carefreeness I lost. And then I've met people who, whether it's cancer or another kind of illness that's really shakes your foundations, they are fearless and they live every day as if it's their last day. Do you fall in one of those two camps?
I think I've embraced a more reckless spirit, but I think it's because I was single when this happened to me, and I was not a parent. This would have completely changed the game if I had this responsibility. Facing illness alone, and even I think in a marital situation or within a couple, you still face illness alone to a certain extent. Um, but I was alone in the sense that my parents were living abroad, and so was my brother. I was split between two countries, and I was not necessarily, I wasn't part of a company or employed. I was also single.
Yeah.
So I felt everything was extremely floating around me. Having made it through, made me feel quite strong and fearless for whatever was going to come.
Yeah.
Uh, and I still, whenever I face moments of adversity today, I often go back to this realization when I was diagnosed,
Hmm.
and I find a lot of power in this
Yeah.
realization.
I have that as well. When I'm
Mm.
faced with something that I'm scared about or uncertain about, I just remember that I've already been through the toughest thing I'm ever going to go through.
Hmm.
Louis, thank you for sharing that. Part of what I'm trying to do with this show is to break down some barriers. And the Middle East, as you know well now, having lived here for so long, there are so many taboos and so many areas where people don't talk frankly. And I think that illness is still one of them, and the repercussions and the side effects and all of that. And so, yeah, thank you for opening up about that.
My pleasure. I think it's important to share lessons of life, and that's why human interactions are so crucial. We learn from each other.
I want to go back a little bit, Louis, and I know that you were born in France, you were raised in London, you did fashion school at St. Martin's, and then you worked in Paris in fashion. And I think a major pivot for you was when you were working with John Galliano at Dior.
Hmm.
Um, Tell me a little bit about that world. From the outside, someone like me, it seems impossibly glamorous and beautiful and very exciting. But you mentioned that when Galliano left Dior, you found yourself quite disillusioned with fashion as well. Explain to me the beauty you saw in it when you first began, and then what changed for you. Why did you quite quickly find yourself not wanting to be in that world anymore?
I think from a young age, I had crystallized fashion and the métier of a designer or couturier. Um, and it was idealized, glamorized in my mind, but also because this perception is nourished by the media, um, and is nourished by the narrative that um, those brands are sharing. When I joined Dior, um, obviously I was extremely excited because I was finally, after a few years of studies at St. Martin's, joining the team of a man I had long time admired, and I must say I was thrilled and not disappointed by the immense curiosity and creativity that Galliano would spark. And I learned a lot, in his team as we were guided towards books, exhibitions, movies, anything that Galliano could have been moved by. So it opened a lot of new doors that were extremely nourishing culturally and creatively.
And he was a genius. I mean, he was just so creative.
No, absolutely. There's a sort of a decadence and an extravagance in his language, which is overwhelming and so joyful, so optimistic, um, and yet quite dramatic and
Hmm.
plunged with melancholia
Yeah.
and nostalgia. And there's a really fine balance in what he manages to orchestrate, because really Galliano is a sort of chef d'orchestre within a couture house. And I was just a tiny link in the chain. At the time, I was asked to develop the prints and the textile accessories. So it was very illustrative base. Um, but what was great working with Galliano is because of his appreciation for fantasy, there was a lot of space for me to create and express myself visually through colors and drawings and prints. But Dior was really taking off, and I think the marketing had somehow taken over the reins of the house and the creativity, the creation. And obviously, at times, it would go against his vision, his perception of things, and his expectations of quality and finishing and refinement. So there was this constant um, battle between both ends. And I think the direction maybe wanted to standardize his vision, to flatten it, to make it more accessible to the grand public, a broader
Yeah,
audience.
yeah.
Um, and I felt, although I cannot speak for himself, but that he was deeply depressed, and the use of alcohol was quite present in his day-to-day life. So I think this was extremely isolating for him. And
Hmm.
although he was orchestrating, the collections and would still produce marvelous things, he was emotionally and humanly quite absent.
Yeah.
It was, I think this was my first realization. Although you can be at the peak of your career and have all the space and means to translate your dreams in tangible ways, you can still be miserable and lonely and absent and cut off from the world. And the practice of your passion becomes a burden, a
Mm.
weight. And the way he was also sacked after drunk at a bar in Le Marais,
Yeah.
held, anti-Semitic
Yeah.
uh,
And it was
insults.
all done. It was all done in a very sort of modern social media way, right? Someone captured it on camera.
Exactly. Seeing this rise and sudden collapse, this violent fall, was an essential reality check to
Mm.
uh, to understand and witness. And I'm grateful it happened at a young age for me, at an early stage in my career, because it made me understand that nothing is for granted, and his glory is extremely ephemeral, and it can slip away from one's hand like sand. Um, and and so automatically, all of a sudden, John had left. He had been cancelled, and Dior uh, or became a sort of theater, a very political theater, where employees were pulling the rugs to cover
Mm.
themselves, and
Mm.
there was little room for genuine human interactions. The environment felt very toxic, and as a young creative who maybe had a utopian vision of the métier, I understood that I didn't fully relate to the this kind of pyramidal structure and political game.
I think if you're creative and you're obviously a romantic and idealist, and you didn't want to spend your time negotiating all the hierarchy. You wanted to sit and draw and create and be left alone. I mean, that's more or less how
Mm,
I see it.
ultimately, yes. And
Yeah.
also, I feel that moving from London to Paris, there was a huge aspect of the day-to-day life which I was missing, which was the the wealth of influences and cultures, which I could
Yes.
not find in Paris
You don't have that in Paris. Yeah.
at all.
Tell me, Louis, about when you first came to Egypt. What you came on a holiday? I think it was in 2017. What did you do, and what was so amazing about the country for you? Because it's a country you come back to repeatedly. You're inspired by it. You have a lot of very good friends here. You cocooned here in COVID and Siwa. Now I think, I mean, I know Siwa quite well from a long time ago, but I think of you and Siwa now almost two sides of the same coin. to a
Mm.
certain degree. Tell me about what pull Egypt has for you.
So Egypt was my first trip was a year after my recovery. It had been a place I had wanted to visit for many years, but strangely enough, I had never made that move. There was a work of this French photographer called Denis Dior, which I loved, who captured the life of downtown Cairo, this sort of quaint, ethereal atmospheres, and it's something I wanted to see from my own eyes. It was
Mm,
less for the ancient world that I came to Egypt for the first time. And during that trip, I fell in love with somebody in Cairo. Um, and this completely changed, the way I lived, because I moved to Cairo for that person, leaving behind Paris and Marrakech, which I kept as bases, but far away and quite distantly. And it's during that time that I started uh, looking at the culture, the craft, meeting people, and really connecting with the country. On that first trip, I had also done this Nile cruise. Actually, I remember it was in February. The weather was amazing, and it was a period of time where, although we were quite a few years after the revolution, there was no one were visiting
mm.
the streets.
Yeah, it was a quiet for many years after the revolution. Yeah.
So it was a very extremely privileged moment to visit Egypt, because locals were available to engage. They were, um, how do I say, excited to see foreigners in villages along the Nile
Hmm.
towards
Hmm.
Aswan. There was a warmth and an excitement which I sense, and it truly moved me. And then coming back to Cairo and spending time with my partner, I got to understand that there was much more to the ancient world, this ancient heritage in Egypt, and there's
Hmm.
also fascinating contemporary scene on many different levels, in the design world, in the music world. Um, and that, yeah, there was something absolutely electrifying about it, and there's an energy I've never found elsewhere in the world than in Cairo.
Yeah. See, I find that for me, Cairo, I don't see what you're saying about Cairo particularly, but for me, I find that there is a very special energy in Aswan.
Mm.
There is something quite magical about that city, and eh, that the ancientness somehow seeps through in every part of the people living there today. And the thing that I find the most striking about Egypt is how um, much of the pharaonic and ancient world still makes up how we think, what we do, how we live, even if it's on a subconscious level. A
Mm.
lot of things in our day-to-day life are taken from that, and it's
Mhm.
just passed down through centuries.
I guess from the bread you eat every day.
Yeah, exactly.
Starts there. Yeah.
Exactly. Absolutely. And then tell me about Siwa. So you went to Siwa and you decided to stay there during COVID, or?
I found myself stranded, basically. Um, it was a period of time where I would cultivate this denial of uh, a forthcoming pandemic, and I was constantly on the go. I had been maybe a couple of months before the shutdown in Ethiopia, in Senegal, and I was hopping in Cairo for a week on my way to Beirut. And I didn't think that my travel plans would be affected. In fact, I was never following the news. And Egypt was announcing a closing of its regions. But I didn't want to be in Cairo. I didn't want to be in a city full of people with a quite fragile immune system. And I remembered having visited in October 2019 the Oasis of Siwa for the first time with a group of friends. We stayed at Rera Melal, and it was a revelation aesthetically. It's a
Yeah,
sort of
it's
a
stunning.
perfection, a perfection in philosophy, and how this philosophy is implemented in a business model, um, surrounded by the lakes, the water, the sand, really, there is something so soothing for the soul about it. And I took a car, and on my way, I called a friend, Munir, who
Well, he was our guest a few months ago on the show.
I know,
Yeah, he's a good friend. Yeah.
likewise, a very dear friend, and his sister Leila as well. I consider them being my godparents in Egypt almost.
Your Egyptian family. Yeah.
Egyptian family, yeah. Um, and so on my way to Siwa, which was again completely intuitive, I decided the evening for the next morning at 5 a.m. to hop in a car and leave. I felt like Marie Antoinette, leaving Versailles. Things are coming danger, um, basically. Um, and I told him, well, I'm on my way to Siwa. There's a place where I can stay. He kindly hosted me during this whole period, which ended up being 5 continuous months.
Yeah.
Because there was so much to do for me there. I was out there every single day and introduced to craftsmen, essentially, but also a few craft women. And I think without those encounters and I would say colleagues I sort of met on site, I would not have appreciated the Oasis the same way.
So it was good for you that you were busy discovering a new type of art in a way.
Exactly, in type of art
Yeah.
and new culture, and dig in, enter homes, connect with people, and tie friendships. It wasn't an isolating experience at all. If anything, it was extremely engaging with other beings.
And had you worked in embroidery before that point?
Yes, I was very familiar with embroidery, so it was the first thing that I had Munir to introduce me to. And Leila was an expert in that domain, in that field. It was the first time, perhaps, that I got to work with ceramic on 3D shapes. I had developed in the past some tiles, but which remained flat to completely 2D. And there was something very meditative about that, developing forms without, there was no kiln and no wheel. Everything
Yeah.
was by hand in a very archaic way. I've always evolved in somehow urban environments, even in
Yeah.
Marrakech to a certain extent. There in Siwa, it was the first time that I was connected to nature, and I really sensed it. And it's something I've been missing dearly ever since.
Something that's very interesting, and something that, of course, in Egypt and in a lot of ancient cultures, I think there is a, a receding nature to the craftsmanship that is no longer at the forefront of the modern world. And we have, as you know, wonderful craftsmen in Egypt, but it's a dying art in a lot of their particular fields. How can we keep that alive? Is there a way that we can keep these industries going?
Absolutely. I think although those crafts were born in a specific historical context and would often serve power or religion, I think they today have to engage with youth. They have to engage with current topics. And I think through contemporary art and dialoguing with artists, perhaps people from external backgrounds, this allows to nourish the conversation and provide those techniques with multiple angles and
So that's
give
very much what you're doing right now.
that's exactly what I try to do.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I try to engage with existing ancestral crafts in regions of the world where there is this wealth, there is this multi-layered identity, but also countries where there is a certain vulnerability facing globalization and standardization. In Egypt, it's quite striking. Um, because Egypt is also facing a quite strong economic crisis, and a lot of those beautiful works are perishing. And in certain cases, there is no state behind backing up those collectives
Yeah.
of artisans. We live in a fast-paced world. AI has joined our day-to-day life in the past couple of years. I see a tough future for these craft communities although AI will never be able to replace them. So I think it's important for us, designers, artists, architects, creatives, but even private, appreciators. It's important to commission, to develop, to, you know, help those craft resonate with our times. It also gives new horizons and to my work, new dimensions
Yeah,
to it. It's a
yeah,
win-win. It's a win-win
yeah,
conversation.
absolutely. What are you working on now that you'd like to share with us? What have you got in the pipeline that you're working on? What's capturing your attention these days?
So I'm working on multiple projects simultaneously and in different countries all at once.
How do you manage that? That's crazy.
Yeah, I think I've segmented my brain by countries almost. uh, you know, and I allocate for each place which I love. It's not that I can pick one time and space to develop projects. And obviously, in parallel to this, they are maybe the more commercial ones, which are the alimentary industrialized projects, which allow personal ones to foster.
It's the bread and butter that keeps you going to do the more heartfelt things. Yeah,
Absolutely. I think for me, this is the
yeah,
trickiest balance to maintain the sustainability of my personal caprices, basically.
absolutely. We all need those. Yeah, yeah.
The ones that I'm excited about, there are a few. I would say there's an ongoing collaboration with female Afghan weavers in the north of Afghanistan. We had initiated the work a year ago, and the first drop of rugs, hand knotted rugs that we designed collectively with the women who were involved in the designs as well. First time for them, as you would usually be asked to weave solely.
Yeah. You know who had done a project like that a few years ago was a girl I had, a very well-known designer who I know you know, Netta Dibbs. She was on
Yes,
our show a few years ago, and she spoke about working with the Afghan weavers as well.
I love Nada. I love Nada, and
Yeah.
I have, as well what she symbolizes for female Arab designers. I think it's important to
Yes.
have like this in the international scene, and she does it so well.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's this project in Afghanistan, and we're preparing a second drop coming this winter. Um, so this has been a fruitful collaboration. I'm so glad because thanks to the visibility we had through press, we have continuous orders, and we have for a good year of production for this collective of women who now work exclusively
That's
from home.
wonderful.
They're not allowed to work in any workshops. So
Yeah.
their only
Yeah.
way of generating an income is locked at home, almost clandestinely.
Mm,
But
mm,
with a
mm.
fixer on site, we managed to coordinate all that. And I think this has been a beautiful journey. Another
Mm.
project is preparing a tapestry. It's for Art Abu Dhabi in November with a collective of embroiderers.
Yeah.
Again,
Yeah.
women actually in Mahdia in Tunisia. And this is a tapestry that speaks about migration and the the journey that sub-Saharan migrants in transit in Tunisia face. The danger, the dehumanization, the struggle. So I think it's yes. I wanted to share this story, which is an important subject today in Tunisia, given the number of migrants who reach the Tunisian shores to cross the Mediterranean to Italy.
To cross into Europe. Yeah.
I think it's an important topic to speak about because we tend to forget the
Hmm.
journey that these migrants cross. And not later than yesterday in Paris, I was having my food delivered by Uber, um, and we see those very very precarious lifestyles and jobs that are offered to those migrants upon arrival,
That's right.
and
That's right.
sometimes forget the courage of these people and the determination to live a better life. So it was a way of giving them justice.
It's a very nice sentiment. Yeah. Yeah. I don't suppose you have a typical day since you travel and you're doing all these different sorts of projects. Are there certain things in your day that are non-negotiable? Do you meditate? Do you exercise in the morning before you begin your day? What are your little quirks that we need to know about?
Um, I wish I had more of a routine, and I try to incorporate it a lot more now. Um, I think I try to read every day. That's something I do. It's my form of meditation. Um, and
What do you like to read, Louis?
autobiographies and essays, essentially. I like when what I read. I don't like fictions. It has to echo with the real life, the real world. So lately, I read a beautiful autobiography of Gisèle Halimi, this Franco-Tunisian lawyer who fought a lot for women's rights in Algeria uh, post-colonization, but also for the Algerian liberation political party. So I like that to read about those kind of profiles, very
Yeah,
inspirational
yeah,
and give hope in the humankind.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And when you're working and drawing, do you listen to music? Do you listen to podcasts, or do you like silence?
No, I listen to music constantly. I listen to music
What do you
constantly.
like?
I love the podcast, the playlist of Habibi Funk. But if I come back from West Africa, I will listen to Afro beats, which I Shazammed in a
Yeah,
taxi. It's quite random and it's very tied to the places I visit, but it's often linked to places I cherish.
it seems to me, Louis, that you're very much a person who lives in the now.
I guess I'm incapable of projecting myself, and I think this is definitely the heritage of illness that has
Yes.
implemented this in my brain. But in the past year, more and more, I guess I'm building a vision, I'm building a project, and I think it's because I've been, and maybe this is a pivotal time for me, but I'm sentimentally tied to somebody, um, and I feel it's maybe the first partner in my life I can project myself with, and it's very new to me.
You see a future with this person. Yeah.
But I'm 35, and it's only now that this has manifested in my life. So finally, I can see, or I dare to see a horizon, which I never allowed me to
Hmm.
see.
Hmm.
So in that sense, I'm I, living the now is crucial for me. But I wish to weave something, with somebody and install a certain or nourish or cultivate a perenity.
But if I understand you correctly, that will not be in one physical place. That will con- continue to be Paris, Marrakech, Cairo. It will continue in this way.
It cannot be, but I think Paris will be the shell. It will be the epicenter.
Okay.
Um, and but yes, I will gravitate around, in all those places
Mm-hmm.
I love. But Paris will be
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
the epicenter for us, for the only reason that our rights are recognized.
Louis, this was so lovely. Thank you so, so much. I really enjoyed our conversation. I'm in awe. I'm in awe of your talent. I'm in awe of all you're doing, and I wish you a lot of luck.
Thank you so much, Malak, and I hope we get to meet in person when I come to Egypt next time.